Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce our dear friend, Herb Kagan. I spent Saturday afternoon with Herb and Alan working on emotional sobriety. And so today I'm going to be listening with great intent to hear him explore step 8 with us, the specific impact of my behavior on others. So I know Herb has wonderful words to share with us, and his inspiration propels me to work harder on discovering who I am and growing in my recovery. So Herb, I can't wait. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, and you don't have to wait. My name is Herb, and I am an alcoholic. I put my email up there. The more important piece of information on that slide is my website, herbk.com. It has a plethora, big word, of resources for you, not the least of which relevant to this workshop, this specific Berlin group twice a month workshop on the steps, is what's called the Way of Life document. You can go to my homepage, go to the workshop subpage, and it will show you resources there for the way I conduct a 6-month or 12-month weekly step workshop, herbk.com. And the Way of Life document is a 66-page document. I encourage people to download it so that they have it available when they're thinking about one or other of the steps, especially where they're trying to help other people. It has lots of support material in there that either outline or analytically expose you to some structure that shows you the organic nature of each of the steps and all of the steps together. Yeah, Susie mentioned that this is not a 12-step meeting, and that is correct in the sense of the formal 12-step fellowship. But this is a gathering, and that's the word I use for our time here together, is a gathering of people who are interested in a spiritual awakening through the process outlined in the big book to have a spiritual awakening. That was a very carefully sculptured sentence. And if you need to hear it again, this has been recorded. But that's the purpose here. I've done it normally each step for the corresponding month. In January, 2 sessions on step 1, very nicely divided into the first half and the second half, addiction and unmanageability. And I did the same with all of the steps until we got to step 4, which is too big for even 1 month. So we dedicated 2 months. As a result of that, we scrunched up a couple steps. And the same here with steps 8 and 9. This is July. I've already done my commentary, unpacking my understanding of and my experience with step 7. And step 6, lingering over probably May, June, July. But here I am in July talking about step 8, which I will continue to talk about in August. It's worthy of a 2-meeting approach. And by the end of the second meeting, you'll understand it. You may not today. But it doesn't matter because I'm going to talk about very substantially step 8 and leave the final closure to the completion of step 8, at least as I interpret it and have experienced it, to the 2 weeks from now in August. And then I will begin talking about step 9, the second meeting in August, and continue to talk about step 9 in September, introducing it in August, concluding it in September, and the final phase of the step 9 process in the second meeting in September. I'll be talking about forgiveness. The material in the big book is pages 76 to 83. Read and highlight it. I suggest that you read and highlight that material first from the perspective of step 8, made a list. Then reread it again from the perspective of step 9, actually making the amends. Very different. The even steps in the 12-step process, it's an interesting insight. I think it's valid for you. It will help you understand each step, and it will help you understand the organic nature of all of the steps. How do they work together? The human being is human. We, each one of us is human, not animals, not inert objects. We're human beings, a very unique reality. And we're human because of two things. At least this is my model and my interpretation. We're human because we have a mind that thinks and can name things. And we have a free will that can make a decision and take action. Each one separate, but not as organs in our body or brain. No. But as functions of the brain, especially the cortex, the neocortex, that final phase of the development of the brain. The brainstem, the first stage that makes us animals. Literally, we have instincts for survival. Reptiles at the lowest level, lizard brain, they call it. Then we have the second brain developed over millions of years of development, which allows us to be animals, mammalians, meaning that we have a limbic system that creates our emotions, all for survival. Keep in mind, this is the whole point of the brain, is for the survival of the individual and then the survival of the genus, human. But the cortex developed that third level of brain, which then made us human, an ability to think reflectively. We're the only sentient reality that can self-reflect. We can stand outside ourselves and watch ourselves. No other reality, based on at least our knowledge, can do that. And we have a free will, meaning that we can make a decision. You can come here or not. And when here, you can listen or not. You have complete free will. And yet, step 1 says our will is not free. In addiction, certainly. That's the whole point of powerless, that word that becomes so hackneyed, repeated so often that we become brain dead to it. I like the phrase no choice in addiction. I have no choice. When I start, I cannot stop. And when I stop, I cannot stay stopped. That's a summary of addiction. There's only those two components, according to the big book, page 44. And it's either or, by the way, not both and. Read it. First paragraph on page 44. But then Bill suggests at the end of step 9 that we're not cured. Not cured of what? Our unmanageability, the best kept secret in the rooms. What is unmanageability? It is not connected to addiction. In the context of the big book, it's a completely separate dynamic. Unmanageability, the spiritual malady. Bill says on page 62 that self-centeredness is the root, and we can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on our own power. We're as powerless over our self-centeredness as we are over alcohol, as he concluded his dissertation on addiction on page 43. There'll come a time and a place when we have no mental defense. And in both cases, page 43 and page 62, that second paragraph, we need God. Translate into a gentler vocabulary if you need to. My human power doesn't work effectively. I need a power other than my human power. a power other than myself. The big book uses the alternative word higher power. That's okay. I like Dr. Berger's phrase a lot. I mean, it just really helps include everybody. I want the best in me to manage the worst in me. So I'm in bondage. In the beginning, bondage of addiction. But then as I mature in the program, as I get more consciousness in the program, as I do more actions contrary to my will, I get free of the addiction, but I'm not free of my unmanageability. I need to address it on a daily basis, not cured, daily reprieve. That first introduction to a 12-step process, Bill has a wonderful metaphor for, on page 25, rocketed into a fourth dimension. Well, that has lots of unpacking. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but just to reintroduce the concept, rocketed, all right, then I must get on the rocket. I must get in the rocket. The implication is then the rocket's going to take me where the rocket's going to take me. We know from our own experience with space travel, I mean, legitimate space travel, since we've been on the moon and developed some sophistication and knowledge since then, that even though I'm in the rocket, I have some responsibility to move the levers to keep myself in the proper trajectory and then in the proper orbit. Well, there are lots of implications too. But the main one is I want to say to you, and I want you to think about, when I get in the rocket's taking me where the rocket's going to go. I have some influence. I have very little control. Now, fourth dimension, interesting. In Bill's time, 1939, what that meant was, in contrast to three dimension, height, width, and depth, the measure of material reality, height, width, and depth. We've all been to a movie, a 3D movie, where we wear those glasses that allows us to have some depth perception, 3D, height, width, and depth. What Bill means, I believe, in the time 1939 with the fourth dimension is the spiritual dimension in contrast to the material dimension. We're rocketed into the spiritual dimension. And Bill says that at the end of step 9, page 84, we enter the world of the spirit. All right. We enter the world of the spirit. We are rocketed into an orbit around the light. That first 3 steps is our relationship with power and the beginning of our journey. Has 3 stages. This second stage, we've just completed looking at the steps 4 through 7 to have a relationship with ourselves. The first 3 steps are to get a relationship with power. Whatever it is you mean by power, the power of the universe, the power of the group, the power of a sponsor, the power of the program. You translate it any way you want, as long as you're connecting to a power other than yourself, unless in fact you go with the Buddhist concept or the Berger concept, which is the best in me deals with the worst in me, or the true self deals with the false self. But the whole point of steps 4 through 7 is to establish a relationship with myself, a healthy relationship, a conscious relationship in which I'm pursuing ever increasing improvement. Step 7. And I'm powerless to do it, therefore it's a prayer. And yet I'm responsible to do it, therefore I suggested accountability. I pray because I'm powerless. I hold myself accountable because I'm human. It's the knockout punch. If you want to change, pray and tell somebody what you're praying about and what you're doing. And now we're moving on to the 3rd stage. What is that? Well, it's a relationship with others. I need to name and remove. Step 8, the even step, to name the obstacles in me to my relationship with others. Step 9, the decision and willingness to remove them. And quite frankly, my experience is to have them removed. Listen to the vocabulary. I try to include the two dynamics, the two components of the dynamics of the step process. My willingness to take responsibility and take action, and the grace that I can't explain, it's a capital G, that mystery that even gives me the willingness. Step 8, to name the obstacles. Step 9, to remove them. The obstacles in me to the relationship with others. Or think of it this way, it's a wonderful metaphor. It's a really crystal clear metaphor. In step 2, I identified that there is sunlight, the sunlight of the Spirit, words from the Big Book, sunlight of the Spirit, or in Appendix 2, the unsuspected inner resource, the sunlight of the Spirit, deep inside myself. And in step 3, a commitment to have a relationship with that sunlight and to realize that there are obstacles in me to the sunlight, those clouds in me that shade the sunlight from me. The sunlight's deep inside me, but so are the clouds. Steps 4 through 7, remove the clouds in me that prevent me from having a relationship with a healthy self. Steps 8 through 9, remove the clouds in me that prevent me from having a healthy relationship with other people. At the end of step 9, you'll see it again if you have not seen it before. You'll see it for the first time on page 84. The conclusion after the promises. Bill says we are placed in a position of neutrality. These are not throwaway words. These are not just good poetry. This is the promise. We are placed, hear the grace of that, a gift freely given. Now it seems that there are some usual preconditions to that. Not true in my case, a story for a different day. I was willing to support my wife's recovery, and when they asked me to stop drinking to support her recovery, I haven't had a drink or an inclination to drink since, and I didn't pray for it, and I didn't go to AA. I didn't even know I had a problem. Placed in a position of neutrality, and that can happen at any time, and not because I did anything. Although there seems to be a correlation between doing the steps and having the freedom. Bill had that experience. If you think he had the mountaintop experience just because he was lucky and it was on a day and it was a fluke, read page 13 in the Big Book, his story. In his second or third day, doesn't matter, a hospitalization, he is still detoxing. Ebby shows up, he works the 6 steps of the Oxford group program. They were both in the Oxford group. He'd been exposed to it, but never connected to it. But here, Ebby shows up on his second day of hospitalization and takes him through the 6 steps verbally. Bill goes through them verbally and is committed to doing the amends when he gets out of the hospital. And on page 14, the third day of his hospitalization, perhaps, he has this mountaintop experience. Good Lord, we'd all love to have it that quickly and that easily. But that's just his experience. Mine was a educational variety, that spiritual awakening that is described in Appendix 2. The outcome of an experience and awakening are the same, a change in the way we think and feel and behave, and it's done to us, not by us. You've heard me talk about that, perhaps at the beginning of this journey back in January. The difference is Bill's was a mystical, almost phenomenal mountaintop experience, which lasted 20 minutes. He was forever changed, and he was conscious of the change, that he was released, delivered. He uses the term, I was delivered from his addiction. And he knew intuitively and deeply that his life's destiny was to help other people have the same experience of freedom from their addiction. Well, it's not my experience. Mine is that educational variety. I didn't know I was alcoholic until I went to AA. And then I discovered I was alcoholic. I didn't know that I was unmanageable for 4 years in AA. I went to meetings. I had a sponsor. I read the book. I worked the steps on my own. I don't recommend that. I recommend that you connect to a sponsor or step guide or an experienced individual so that they can help you navigate it. I learned a new word last week, Sherpa, SHERPA. It's that person that helps a person climb to the top of a mountain. They pack the goods and they establish the campfire and they provide the food. They do all of the work as I navigate them. And that's what a step guide or sponsor is. Not that they do the work, but they do the support for you to do the work. Sponsor, step guide, Sherpa. Bill uses the term recovered at the very beginning of the big book. Read the title page, the second title page. The first title page only has the title, Alcoholics Anonymous. But the second title page repeats that, Alcoholics Anonymous, but then how many thousands of men and women have recovered, past tense, which just is a synonym for what he says on page 84. Placed in a position of neutrality. We're not inclined and we're not resisting. We're not fighting it. We're not thinking about it. Placed in a position of neutrality, the best kept secret in the rooms, but we're not cured. We have a daily reprieve. A daily reprieve from what? A daily reprieve from our unmanageability. You want to have a very embarrassing but profound experience if you haven't had it before. Read pages 60 to 62 in the big book. For me, it's a description of the exact nature of unmanageability, the spiritual malady, the cancer of the soul. But don't just read it as it's written. Read that first, pages 60 to 62, and highlight it. But then reread it, changing all of the pronouns and the verbs to personal and present tense. I, me, now. Pages 60 to 62. I don't care how much time you have in the program, how free you are of your addiction. We're never free of our unmanageability. We have a daily reprieve based on doing steps 10, 11, and 12. Bill calls it our way of living. Well, how do we get there? We do step 8. In the 12 and 12, the two supports for this work is the big book, pages 76 to 83, and the 12 and 12, chapters 8 and chapters 9. Don't overlook the 12 and 12, please. Written when Bill was 20 or 25 years sober. That was his commentary on the steps. Very few instructions, but wonderful commentary on the steps. Step 8 is really simple. It's just naming the impact of my behavior. And the purpose is to establish a partnership. In the 12 and 12, that's the way he talks, because he talks about emotional sobriety for the very first time in the 12 and 12, many places. He had this awareness, which allowed him then to write that letter that most everybody has been exposed to, that's been exposed to any concept of emotional sobriety. And he talks about emotional sobriety, the next frontier. Published written in 1956, published in 1958 in the Grapevine. Emotional sobriety, the next frontier. Well, it didn't get any traction. The fellowship and the world was not ready for it. There was an effort in 1980s, mid-80s with Ernie Larson when he wrote about stage 2 recovery. If you want to know more about the initial beginnings of emotional sobriety and that awareness, read Ernie Larson's book, Stage 2 Recovery. But then, of course, in the last 20 years, it's become a topic of conversation because people have become conscious of the lack of it. Balance and homeostasis and harmony and serenity. Restless, irritable, and discontented. Those words are in the doctor's opinion, not to describe addiction, at least as I'm reading it today, in light of the fact that addiction isn't the issue. That's what the big book says, that unmanageability issue. Bottles are only a symbol. Alcohol is only a symptom of the problem. Carl Jung said it in much more poetic and spiritual terms. Alcoholics are uniquely spiritual people, he said in a letter to Bill Wilson. Alcoholics are uniquely spiritual people. They have a deep thirst and a deep hunger for the spirit, capital S, and they get distracted by spirits with a small s. It's perfect. I had a deep, deep thirst and hunger for something, and I didn't know what it was, and I mistranslated it. I went into a monastery for 7 years to become a Catholic priest. 7 years studying philosophy, theology, psychology, etc. 7 years of silence. And I left because I didn't find it. After 7 years of daily meditation, 7 years of silence, 1964, I hung up my black robe and I didn't meditate again for another 25 years because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know why I was doing it, and I didn't know how to do it. When a man took me through the steps, a step guide, a Sherpa, in 4 years of sobriety, 1988, 4 years of sobriety, daily meetings, daily conversations with the sponsor, step studies, book studies, etc., etc. I had not changed, and I did not know that I had not changed, and I did not know that change was possible, and I did not certainly know what the process of change was. I'm saying it this way because steps 8 and 9 bring the change to a conclusion. That first spiritual awakening that is promised when we finish steps 1 through 9. Yes, I did say finish the 9th step. People who talk about you'll never finish the 9th step are ignorant. They're inexperienced. I'm not being negative. I'm not being critical. I'm observing, because my experiences, I've done the steps 4 different times with 4 different Sherpas over a 20-year period. And each time I have finished the amends within 6 months to 2 years. I have finished amends. When I get to the 9th step, I'll talk about finishing all amends. People that you can't find, people that you shouldn't find, dead people. Very difficult situations. Yes, you can finish all of your amends. And what's the reason that I want to is that's when the promises are manifest. The big book suggests halfway through. I wasn't conscious of it. It may have happened at that point. But when I finished the amends in January of 1989, I worked all year 1988 on the process, and I finished those amends after about 12 months of doing the work. And I looked back over my shoulder and I realized I had been changed, a radical change that I had never been able before to accomplish. And I was converted from a seeker. I left the monastery. I was a seeker. I continued into psychology. I continued into self-help. I continued into LSD and Johnny Walker Black Label. I wasn't finding what I was looking for, but I didn't know what I was looking for. But I had that deep thirst, that deep hunger that kept driving me. And I'm in AA for 4 years and I'm still thirsty, spiritually thirsty, never physically, never emotionally thirsty, in the truest of sense. But I didn't know any of that. I could not have verbalized it like I can now with the perspective that I have and the experience that I have. But in 1989, after I finished the step process, I knew that I was converted from a seeker to a finder. Oh my, being a finder is so much better than a seeker. I'm grateful for the grace of being a seeker, but I'm more grateful for the grace of being a finder. Now, I worked hard and I was responsible for taking some actions, and I was lucky to be able to find people that allowed me to do the actions that were really, really transformative, knowing how to apply those first 9 steps and to finish them. A grace and my willingness. During the process of the 9th step, I said to the men I was meeting with that I was really willing to finish the 9 steps, but I was really busy. And he said, willingness without action is fantasy. Well, there's a refrigerator quote. Willingness without action is fantasy. So I was willing to make a list. Most people, when I talk to them, of the people harmed, most people, when I talk to them and I ask them what harm was, they start talking to me about the behavior. Well, first we ask, well, who did you harm? And they give me the name or the person or the institution. Who did I diminish? And what did you do? I ask them. And they give me some behavior that they did. And I say, well, what was the harm? And they said, well, didn't you hear me? I gossiped about them. I stole money from them. I used company time for my own benefit. Well, that's not the harm. Hello, hello, hello. The harm is, what was the negative impact on the institution? What was the negative impact on the person? That's the specific harm done. I use the word as an alternative, a synonym to harm, diminish. How did I diminish the quality of their life because of the impact of me in their life, the impact of my behavior on them? It's good to be clear and specific. Who did I diminish? Who did I harm? It's good to talk about the specific behavior that I did. And I suggest to them that they use 3x5 cards. Because the first time I did it, I used a 8x11 paper, and I had like 35 events and situations, and it got real messy by the time I finished my 9th step. So somebody made a suggestion, my second step guide, that I use 3x5 cards. It's just a mechanical suggestion, but it really helped me. That way I could reorder them and I could make notes on them, and there was lots of space. A mechanical suggestion to help you, to help me navigate. It's like a roadmap. My 8-step list is a roadmap and an accountability partner. My 8-step tells me what I need to do, and my 8-step tells me what I've done and what is left to do. It's my accountability partner, and it's the sort of the report card when I go back to the step guide or sponsor who's leading me through. I can look and say, yes, I'm halfway through my amends. And that's when he makes the comments. And when's the last time you made one? About 30 days ago. He said, well, why are you taking so long? What's preventing you from getting on with it? Oh, well, I'm really busy. The promises are manifesting. Willingness without action is fantasy. Bam. Don't burn your 5th step or your 4th step, please. Don't throw it away. My 4th and 5th step were the material I used to surface my character defects in step 6. My 4th and 5th step material was what I used to identify the people that I've harmed. But there's lots of misunderstanding, I also believe, about harms in the sense of resentments. I've heard people say in a meeting, I don't correct them publicly, but I've heard them say, who's ever in your 4th step, especially in your resentment inventory, belongs on your 8th step. Well, clearly they don't understand harm. I had lots of resentment for people that I did not harm, and I had lots of harm in step 8 where I had no feelings at all. I was a thief. If you had it and I didn't and I wanted it, I took it. I didn't have any feelings about that. Even guilt and shame. I mean, I was so dead inside. People and circumstances were furniture in my life. If I needed the furniture, I took it. If I didn't need it, I threw it away. Same with people. Don't get rid of your 4th and 5th step notes until you finish your 9th step is my suggestion. It's not in the big book, but it's my experience. Until you finish your 9th step. The man who took me through the work the 3rd time, 1994. It was a 2-year contemplative process. I wasn't coming from pain. I was coming that I knew that there was more, and there was more. A story for a different day. He says, I'll bet you still have your 4th and 5th steps notes from the last 2 times you did the work, right? And your autobiography that you did in your 1st year, right? And I had to embarrassingly say yes, because I knew the motive underneath the motive is, I mean, this is pretty good stuff. I mean, it might make a good movie someday, he said with his grandiosity. Oh my God, unrecovered narcissist at that time. Completely delusional about that. Oh, I'd had an awakening in 1988, and I had a deeper and broadening awakening in 1991. The years are not important to you, but I'm saying that this is a process, confirming what I said at the beginning, that spiritual awakening, that dimmer switch that goes up a notch at a time. More light, more light, more light, until there's sufficient light to see that we didn't see. And then more light, more light, more light, until there's sufficient light that we can see that we didn't see, but now that we see. Then you can carry that one on, because it's a progressive process. Infinite light. We're in relationship with infinite light, that there's always more. This is really good news to the addict if you take it from a positive standpoint. There's always more, because I'm in relationship with infinite light. I'm in relationship to an infinite God. There's no end to it. It's bigger, it's bigger, it's bigger. And there's always more. Not in the sense of driving us from need, but in the sense of inviting us like a magnet forward. Bill Wilson gives us the motive for doing this on page 76. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any length for victory over alcohol. You could say addiction here, because I know some of you are not alcoholics or even drug addicts. You might be a food addict. You might have a problem with relationships in Al-Anon. You might have a problem with gambling or pornography or sex in general. Bill, in the preface to the very first edition, says our way of living may have its advantages for all. Not just alcoholics and not just addicts, but all human beings. I see that unmanageability as the human condition, not the addict's condition. But it is on steroids for the addict. Bill says it this way. Extreme examples of self-will run riot. All human beings are examples. Addicts are extreme examples. The steroids of addiction. At least that's my interpretation. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning. Well, when did I do that? Bill talks about step 3 being the beginning, doesn't he, on page 58. And he says here, if you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, you hear it all the time. What does going to any length means? And then people start talking about standing on your head and or whatever else they might interpret. And I understand the spirit of that, and it's wonderful. It's just not accurate. The big book tells us what it means to go to any length, very simply. If you have decided your free will decision, step 2, there is a power that will help me. Step 3, I can have a relationship with, and I can turn to having a relationship with, and I can be turned to having a relationship with a power other than myself. There's no action in step 3. It's a commitment to steps 4 through 9, the actions of turning and the actions of being turned. Grace and willingness. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length, here's the answer, any length, then you are ready to take certain steps. This is step 3. I'm assuming they mean steps 4 through 9. So he says on page 76 that he's reminding us that at the beginning, step 3, we made this commitment to finish step 9 because we wanted victory over alcohol. But he says it again, almost in the same words on page 79. So he's addressed on page 76 the first half of the first step, and on page 79, he addresses the second half of the first step, reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience. That's the daily reprieve. That's the formula for dealing effectively with our unmanageability. Reminding ourselves that we've decided to go to any length to find a spiritual experience. We ask, that's a prayer, that we be given strength and direction for our mind and strength for our will to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences might be. Now on page 77, he also gives us the value proposition. This isn't about me. This isn't about my happiness. This isn't about my freedom. This isn't about my joy. As a number 1 priority, page 77. At the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order. True. The steps are about me getting free of addiction and learning how to manage my unmanageability, learning how to have an effective and healthy relationship with life. But then he says, this is not an end in itself, me. The turning that we commit to in step 3 is a turning from our self-centeredness of unmanageability, pages 60 to 62. A turning from our unmanageability, a turning from our self-centeredness to other-centeredness. A relationship with other with a capital O, and a relationship with others with a small o. Steps 11 and 12, respectively. This is not an end in itself, my happiness or my freedom. It's a secondary goal. Our real purpose, I'm quoting now, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people around us. That's a resonating theme. Read the prayer on page 63, the step 3 prayer. Read the prayer on page 76, the 7-step prayer. They use the terms to be helpful and useful. Not about me. It's about becoming channels of the light to the world around us, to bring light into the darkness that we experience around us, because we're lanterns now. A wonderful image. A sponsor, step guide, a member of the fellowship. We become lanterns. We're not the light, but we're channels of the light, shining the light on the path that we have walked so that others can walk in the light of our experience to have their own experience. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. So we name the person, we name our behavior, and we name the impact of our behavior. You borrowed $10,000 or you stole $10,000. Well, that's not the harm. What was the harm to the person? You may not know. So my suggestion is that you ask, but if you do know, well, they were at the very least disadvantaged by not having the resource of the money. At the very most, it might have prevented one of their children from going to college or from them to seek an opportunity for their own investment or whatever it is. This is where experience is necessary. All of the steps can be done on your own. I'm convinced of it, with 2 exceptions, steps 8 and steps 9. Step 8 and step 9 cannot be done effectively on my own because I cannot be objective about me and or the impact of me on the world around me. I need somebody with experience and somebody with objectivity, somebody who will tell me the truth and not be concerned about my feelings. Now, of course, I couldn't do any of the steps without help. I'm not saying that we can do the steps other than 8 and 9 on our own. I am not saying that. I'm just making a point that steps 8 and 9, crucial that we have somebody with experience. Not everybody has done steps 8 and 9, and not everybody has done them or had the experience of the 8th and 9th impact in the same way. My step guide had enough humility to say, Herb, in the case where you have this harm to a woman that you speculate about, that you harmed her 25 years ago, I don't know. That's not my experience. I don't have anything to share with you. But find a woman in the program that you trust and ask her. See, this is step 8 preparation. Ask her, if she had experienced this, would she even want it brought to visibility? Or would she just rather have it buried? If she does want visibility, how would she suggest that you approach it? This is all the preparation of step 8. My step guide actually dress rehearsed once we went through. Who did I diminish? What did I do? What harm did I cause? And there's one more component I won't give you till next time, because I don't do that when I'm helping other people, because I don't want to minimize this particular piece of the process. There is a 4th piece. It's crucial. But I want you to think about this in terms of any of the situations where you feel personally that there might have been, or you're clear that there is because they told you so, or somebody else did, that there's harm. And then next week, 2 weeks from now, I'll give you that 4th component and talk more specifically about that. Looking at step 9, what it means is my change, amend. What does it mean to amend? It means I need to change. If I'm unfaithful, to go to my partner and say, I really apologize for being unfaithful, and then next week be unfaithful, that's disingenuous, isn't it? That's hypocritical. So no, I don't attempt to make an amend until I'm absolutely committed to the opposite behavior. Now, I have lots of additional comments on that, but I'm not going to make them today. I'm just giving the framework for a discussion. Amends means my commitment to change my behavior so that I'm not impacting the people around me in the same way that causes harm. The other is, amend is to repair the damage. So the amend for me to change is about me. The amend to repair the damage is about them. I love Chuck C. in the new pair of glasses. He said, to balance the scale. Steps 8 and 9 are to balance the scale. You know, Lady Justice, she stands there blind and she has a scale. Justice, blind justice is, if I've harmed somebody, I need to attempt to. I cannot change history, but I can take some positive and healing, I'm using that term, healing action that will balance the scale. I'm quite clear after I finished the process the first time that it was a process of forgiveness that began with the 4th step. A process of forgiveness that began with the 4th step and ends with the 9th step. And you've heard it in the Lord's Prayer, you've heard it in the St. Francis prayer. When I look up the word forgiveness in a dictionary, when I'm talking about the 9th step in September, I will talk a little bit about forgiveness process, the mechanics of it. But I looked up the word in the dictionary, look at my hand. Forgiveness is a decision to release them. That's really what it is. If you take a look at my website and the Way of Life document on it, right around the 9th step in that Way of Life document is a 3-page reflection meditation on the forgiveness process. A process, not an event. the men that I worked with helped me in the preparation of the 8th step with the dress rehearsal so that I could do the 9th step effectively. Some of them played the role of my partner. Some of them played the role of my boss. Some of them played the role of my son. Some of them played the role of other people, male or female, so that I could rehearse the words, experience the feelings, wordsmith so that it's more effective, not to protect me, but more effective in my communication to help them hear it and to heal from it, the process. The most important thing about the 8th step, I believe, is, as I started to say, experienced people. Meaning experienced with the steps, meaning experienced with the process of 8th and 9th preparation and conclusion, and specific experience with the particular situation. Like this man who referred me to a woman. I have a cadre, a team of people that are in a 12-step program that I refer people to. Lawyers, tax people, insurance people, business people, clergy and therapists, if the need be, because I don't have expertise in those particular areas, and I refer people to be able to get some suggestions. But these are resources that are already in a 12-step program. What we're doing here is we're attempting to convert our relationship to a partnership with all of the people in the world. Bill uses that term in the 12 and 12. Most of us have a problem with establishing true partnership with others. I love that term. We need to identify the clouds in us to the sunlight in us. What was the harm done? Meaning the impact, meaning the damage. It's not about my behavior, although that's a warm-up. It's about the impact of my behavior. What harm did it cause them? How did I diminish the quality of their life? How did I damage their life financially, emotionally, mentally, spiritually? I'm in bondage of my self-centeredness, and I want to be free. So as in the turnaround in the 4th step with the 5th step and the 6th and 7th, I identify that I'm in jail of my own making. There's no walls, there's no ceiling, there's no floor. I do need to recognize I'm holding the bars in front of my face, and all I need to do is to release them. Steps 4 through 9 is a process of releasing me from the bondage of me and releasing others from the bondage of me. My website is herbk.com, and hopefully that was helpful, and more, much more on step 8 next time. Thank you.